Hi, I'm Buddy Frank, part of the museum staff here at the National Automobile Museum, and welcome to the March edition of our second Thursday presentation. This month our topic is the car, the myth, and the man known as Preston Tucker and the Tucker 48. You know, there's an old saying among museum, at least auto museum guys, that you don't have a real collection unless you have one of these Tuckers and a car owned by Elvis Presley. Well, here at the National Automobile Collection, we qualify. This 1973 Cadillac Eldorado is somewhat unique for its egg crate grille, retractable bumper, and that it was actually titled in Elvis's name. You see, the king owned and bought dozens and dozens of cars, mostly Cadillacs, often gifting them to friends and family and putting them in their names or in the names of the band members. But he received this car as a birthday gift from his father, Vernon. The king actually drove it as his personal ride for several months, but then he regifted it in his tradition to his karate instructor, Kang Ree of Memphis, Tennessee. Not everyone was aware that Elvis was actually a 7th degree black belt. But our subject today is the Tucker. Sometimes you'll see this car called the Tucker Torpedo, but that name was never official. The only correct title is the Tucker 48. And there's never any problem identifying which year of Tucker you own, since they were all 1948 models. If you will, they were one and done. The factory built only 51 cars. They were numbered 1001, 1002, 1003, and so on, right up to 1000, number 50. Our car is actually 1032, produced with a blue interior and originally a gray body. The very first Tucker was a prototype, and it was numbered 000. It was a bit different from the production models like this one, but it still exists at the Schweikert Antique Automobile Museum in Pennsylvania. Like our own Thomas Flyer, this first Tucker is also on the National Historic Vehicle Registry as number 5, while our Thomas is number 12. Here's a small clip from HVA's video about the car that you can find on YouTube.
This is the 1947 Tucker 48 prototype, the Tin Goose. This car matters because it was the only Tucker on the planet at that time, and nothing else was even being built at that time. This car was the car that had to sell this whole corporation, had to sell the whole world. I call this the prototype, pretty much. This is the first real prototype that there was, and it's the car he showed the world, and the car that got the whole world excited. Where the country was at the time, they were hungry for a car, and this thing was probably, this Tucker was a compilation of all those dreams and all those wishes. And though all the cars are important that came after, and if you ask a Tucker owner, his car is the most important car. Sorry, this one is. I don't know if it was just because the country was so hungry for something exciting and get on with America, that everywhere this car went, you know, it went to Madison Square Garden, it went to, to Washington D.C., and there was just crowds, hundreds and thousands of people. Well, the Tucker Corporation formed really fast. In December of 1946, actually 1945, he formed a group of people to build this car. Harry Miller had died by then in society. Edsel Ford was dead, Henry Ford was dead, and there was this group of people in Detroit, and he was pretty well known. He had been known as probably the best salesman in the United States. This thing just sort of, avalanched on itself, and pretty soon, here he has the biggest plant in the world at that time. He can build anything there, and he's got money coming in because he's done these. In Chicago, where he was building the car, he was really good at getting money people, and he'd throw these lavish parties. He'd get a certain amount of money, and he'd take that money and throw a party to get 5 times that amount of money, and just keep doing it. Early in 1947, the company's up and running, and people are in Chicago, and he's hiring. He's got a lot of people running around the plant. He's bought air-cooled motors. Things are looking really bright. And fenders and tires and pieces are coming in the door. So they're going great guns trying to get this car built, and they're actually building cars, which is in itself, to me, just amazing. That they're getting bodies stamped out, they're getting parts from all over the country. because they had air-cooled motors by then, they had a good supply of steel from air-cooled motors, which is really hard to get back then. And these cars were getting built, and if you look at any of the Tucker cars now, they're all a little different, but there was a progression there, and they were, if you think of the fact that there's 47 out of 51 still left, they were pretty amazing cars.
You can see the full video of that clip on HVA's website. I encourage you to take a look. There are some difference between that Tin Goose prototype and our car. One you'll notice right away is the suicide doors on our number 32 Tucker. That wasn't the way they were on the prototype. All the production Tuckers use suicide doors with a common center post. That wasn't for style as much as manufacturing efficiency. The center pillar and all the locking hardware were interchangeable and thus lowered costs. The prototype wheels are 13 inches and made from magnesium, but ours are steel. But perhaps the most significant change is with the engine. Since Tucker was able to acquire a gigantic former B-29 bomber factory as a war surplus asset, he liked the idea of having a big engine. The B-29s featured engines with 6-inch bores and 6-inch strokes. Therefore, Tucker thought a 5-inch bore and a 5-inch stroke could easily be made on the existing factory equipment. He was right. However, the resulting motor was highly impractical for a car. At 589 cubic inches, it produced 200 horsepower and cruised along at just 250 to 1200 RPMs. That was perfect. But it took at least a 24-volt battery or an auxiliary generator to get the thing started, much like the B-29 did. The battery itself was so heavy it collapsed the suspension. This problem alone nearly ruined the debut of the machine as memorialized in the 1998 movie Tucker, the Man and His Dream.
Preston, get this thing started now!
Get out there, do something, stall, anything. Anything's going crazy.
Eddie!
Huh?
Signal me when you're ready from that corner.
That corner?
Yeah.
We gotta take out some weight.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Preston Tucker. I'm sorry for the delay, but perhaps this will perk you up. The Tuckerettes! What are Tuckerettes?
The girls. Girls.
Back tires can't move with all that weight on the rear wheels.
Junior? Try this for a brace.
Let's hear it for the Tuckerettes.
Okay, Junior, tell your dad. Let's go. Set.
Aren't they lovely creatures?
Dad! Dad! Back here! Back here! Dad, we got him.
That movie, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and produced by George Lucas, generated a lot of interest in the car, just like Preston Tucker did with his movies. And once the movie was released, it sent the value of these cars soaring. That didn't bother the filmmakers since both Lucas and Coppola owned Tuckers. Coppola still has his and drives it regularly at his winery. Today, you'd be hard-pressed to obtain any Tucker in any condition for less than $1 million. But not everyone loved the car or the movie. People magazine called the film a nice piece of innocent entertainment and a considerable rearrangement of the truth. The Tucker car, they said, in fact, was in some respects a streamlined lemon, and Tucker himself was a living jigsaw puzzle. Industrial visionary, half-educated opportunist, promotional genius, amusing con artist, tender husband, big spending boozer, loving father, and in the opinion of his adversaries, an out-and-out crook. That's a quote. We don't think the Tucker was a lemon, but there was never any doubt that Tucker was a far better showman and salesman than he was an engineer. He had to scrap his plans for that monster motor and instead look to Franklin and their helicopter engine developed for the Bell 47. It was originally air-cooled, but was heavily modified to incorporate water jackets and a radiator system. Here at the museum, we actually have a motor in the car and a spare motor on display that you can examine. While it boldly proclaims Tucker on the intake manifolds, if you look closely below the carburetor, you can still see Franklin imprint on the valley cover. This production motor performed quite well. It was small, but still generated 166 horsepower. More importantly, it weighed a fraction of what the original motor did. If you go to YouTube, you'll probably find more clips on the Tucker 48 than any other single automobile. Again, that's probably a tribute to Preston Tucker and his self-promotion. There's a good example if you take a look at the promotional movie his firm made about the car. You'll see that it's actually more about Preston than it is the 48.
Say, that's pretty, isn't it? And believe me, that Tucker is a modern miracle of mechanics. And the man who built it, well, let me tell you something about Preston Thomas Tucker. The first time he ever saw an automobile was back in 1912. In the excitement of the situation, he found himself on a muddy road with the wheels of that automobile passing over his legs. But the mud was soft and he wasn't hurt, and that was the first view of the machine that was to mold his thoughts and actions for most of the years of his life. It started a series of plans and actions that brought the Tucker car that everyone is talking about. And why shouldn't they talk? This new Tucker has everything. Has individual wheel suspension. It has a rear motor. And it also oh, but now wait a minute now. I'm getting ahead of my story. I'll tell you more about the car later, but first, let me tell you a little more about the man Tucker. Preston Tucker is a man who believes first, last, and always in the American way of free enterprise. Though there are those who believe there is no more room in this country for new industries, or perhaps new competition is more correct, Mr. Tucker doesn't feel that way. Even when just a kid, Preston was giving competition, but fair competition, to automobile dealers in his hometown of Capac, Michigan. He bought up cars that seemed hopelessly wrecked. Those that were basically sound, he rebuilt and changed in his mother's backyard and resold them on the open market. His shop was the barn and back of his mother's home. And today, though his shop is not a barn, but the world's largest automotive plant, this same Preston Tucker is changing the design and mechanics of the modern motor car to bring you the new Tucker.
But all this hype worked. He managed to sign up nearly 1,200 dealers across the country and raise deposit money from each of them. As his grandson says in that first video, he used the money raised at some promotional parties to throw even bigger parties and raise more money. Some would call that an illegal pyramid scheme. He was certainly a master of hype, but some thought those efforts bordered on fraud, especially some of his critics on the Securities and Exchange Commission. The movie touches on these issues with Wall Street and questionably assigns much of the blame on politicians and the big three automakers who didn't exactly welcome newcomers. That's never been proven, and indeed many other smaller firms like Studebaker and Kaiser introduced new and innovative designs after the war about the same time, and they succeeded. In the end, though, Preston Tucker won his case in court and was never convicted of anything. However, the time and effort to defend himself led to his bankruptcy and the demise of the company. Thus, only have 51 of these originally produced cars. But Preston Tucker did have some good automotive credentials. Starting as early as his 16th birthday, Tucker had a knack for buying and selling cars, always generating a profit. He also made a name for himself with the War Department, developing the Tucker turret for both armored cars and bombers, and a strange mobile gun platform called the Tucker tank that reportedly could hit 124 miles an hour.
A speedy, powerful new welded armor car is being demonstrated by its inventor, Preston Tucker, racing car designer. The amazing war machine will make 100 miles an hour on roads, but not on these roads. It's designed principally for anti-aircraft work, although it can be used as a tank for ground combat too. The tires are puncture-proof, but I wonder, how about the crew?
For over a decade, he teamed with legendary engine builder and IndyCar designer Harry Miller. It's perhaps why Tucker chose in 1948 to have his drivers drive at 80 to 90 miles an hour on the famous track for hours on end, stopping only to refuel. When a mechanic mistakenly put avgas into one of the cars, the engine seized while entering a curve. Driver Eddie Offutt lost control and the car rolled several times before landing upright on its wheels. Offutt was uninjured except for a bruised elbow, but Tucker used the accident to promote the car's unique safety features such as seat belts and a pop-out windshield. So to conclude our presentation this Thursday, let's see if we can separate some of the hype from the car. Was it the first car to have its Cyclops center headlight turned with a steering wheel? Well, yes and no. Several earlier cars had fenders that turned with a wheel and the headlamps were mounted on those fenders. Tucker actually wanted to do that too, but he settled on the Cyclops design for aerodynamic reasons. Was Tucker the first car with seat belts? Again, somewhat questionable. Seat belts first appeared as early as 1885, installed on New York City taxicab, mainly for the riders. The belts were not standard on the Tucker, but they were offered as an option. Today's three-point belts first appeared in 1958 on Volvos and Saabs. Did Tucker have the first pop-out windshield? This one appears to be true. Safety glass that didn't shatter emerged in the 1930s, but Tucker was apparently the first to have a pop-out front glass. Did the Tucker have the first padded dash? This too seems correct. Others advocated for this years earlier, but Tucker actually produced a factory car with a padded dash as a standard feature. Was the Tucker the first car with an aerodynamic design? Well, we can disprove that one right here at the museum. Our rare 1934 Demaxian was certainly aerodynamic, as was our one-of-a-kind 1937 Airmobile. Chrysler also joined the club with their revolutionary Airflow 5-passenger coupe, but you can go back even further and look at the 1899 creation of the Belgian Camille Janatsky, who broke the land speed record 3 times and became the first person ever to hit 100 kilometers per hour in his aerodynamic streamliner. Finally, how about Tucker's revolutionary crash chamber on the passenger side? In the case of an oncoming car, the passenger could crawl into the chamber, as Shannon from our staff demonstrates. This is really revolutionary, and Tucker introduced it, but it's hardly practical. Who could see a crash coming with enough time to use it? But it does add to the charm and the myth of the Tucker 48. Again, that's a brief look at this interesting car, and as we said earlier, you could find dozens and dozens of other videos to increase your knowledge about this fascinating car and the remarkable creator, Preston Tucker. Well, I'm Buddy Frank, and I hope you join us again for our next Second Thursday presentation, and stop by the Auto Museum here anytime to take a look at the Tucker.